It's Thursday, July 10th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense with Granthermes. I'm Granthermes. Today on the show, Trump's 90 trade deals in 90 days deadline has come and gone, and we definitely do not have 90 new trade deals. Now, that was always unlikely to happen. Trade deals are complicated, the world is big, but the administration made that promise anyway. And we need to talk about what happens now that that promise has been broken, what's been happening, and what it means for the rest of us when we go to buy things over the next few months. But first, please make sure that you're following or subscribe to the show in whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube. If you're a watcher, sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got a brand new article up this week all about how private prisons are cashing in on the brand new Big Beautiful Bill and all of the brand new funding that Immigration and Customs Enforcement is getting. To get access to that video, though, you got to pay $5 a month. That's all it is. You get access to that article and a bunch of great other content that I've got going up there all the time. If you don't want to do that, please share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. Hey, listener, you know what the show is all about breaking down the news in a way that actually makes sense. No spin, just real reporting and smart conversations. And as an audience, you're sharp, curious, and engaged, and I know that you value where you spend your time and money. So if you're a brand, an organization, or a cause that aligns with truth, trust, and just cutting through the noise, then we want to partner with you. Whether you're launching a new product, pushing a policy, or you just want to get your message in front of an audience that values insight over outrage, let's make it make sense together. For ad rates, sponsorship packages, and custom campaigns, you can email ads@matchbookmediapod.com. That's ads@matchbookmediapod.com. Because the smartest conversations deserve the smartest partners. Okay, let's get on with the show. So Wednesday this week marked 90 days since President Trump's quote-unquote Liberation Day announcement from the White House Guard. That was the one where he stood in the Rose Garden with a big chart of tariff numbers and said that he was, quote, liberating the U.S. from bad trade relationships with other countries. Now, a lot of those numbers, and I talked about this before, were weird or just wrong. And the tariffs the U.S. was putting in place, or wants to, just didn't make any sense on a basic economics level. You can go listen to my conversation with Yale economist Jason Abeluk from May 23rd for more on that. But while Liberation Day was originally meant to have the tariffs go into place right away, Trump then paused them for 90 days. One of his top economic advisors, Peter Navarro, said at the time that the White House plan was to make 90 deals with 90 countries on this tariff list in 90 days. And as of today, we have 2 deals. One of them is with the United Kingdom, which really didn't change the existing trade agreement we had unless you were selling ethanol or beef as a big company, or you were someone looking to buy a luxury car or a Rolls-Royce jet engine. Basically, nothing about our lives will really change all that much. The other deal is with Vietnam. Now, there aren't a ton of details on this deal, but the big thing is that it's really lopsided. So U.S. exports into Vietnam won't have any tariffs on them, meaning U.S. goods will be cheaper for Vietnam and Vietnamese consumers to buy. But goods that come in from Vietnam into the U.S. will have a 20% tax on them, and the things that are what's called transshipped into the U.S., which means that they're goods that are sent from another country that are then held by a middle country as they make their way to the U.S., in this case that's Vietnam, those things will face a 40% tariff, which is pretty high. And just a reminder, tariffs are, for all intents and purposes, taxes on imported goods, meaning things that get shipped into the U.S. Those higher costs are passed on to consumers, making things more expensive for us. Now, the reason countries have tariffs in the first place is to encourage a level of industries in their own borders to build or make or do the things they do in the country they're in theory, helping to create jobs. In reality, that's just not really how things work anymore, if they ever really did. Now, Trump has touted planned or agreed to investments of major companies like Apple or Samsung to bring manufacturing facilities back to the U.S., but none of those things have actually materialized. They're just commitments to do a thing. In a recent survey from the Institute for Supply Management, a nonpartisan group that tracks manufacturing, found that while the overall economy is growing, manufacturing has shrunk for the last 3 months straight and at a faster rate than it had been before. And manufacturing employment also shrank about 4%, cutting around 8,000 jobs just last month alone, according to the Federal Reserve. Now, Trump has also tried to bully companies into eating the cost of the tariffs, but that's just not how the U.S. economy operates. It's also a president here, which is important to say, attempting a level of intimidation and price controls that we normally associate with socialist leaders in other countries. So it's weird to have that idea coming from a Republican U.S. president. Now, that aside, let's talk about where the rest of these things stand right now. If we have 88 other deals to make, where are those things? Well, you might have heard about a trade deal with China last month. That ended up not really being a deal at all. It's a framework for an agreement to keep talking about making a deal, but it is a step in the right direction with the world's second largest economy. You also might have heard about deals with our two largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, but the president recently blew those up and walked away, and so we don't really know where those things stand right now. He also extended the overall deadline for when those steep tariffs he talked about on Liberation Day will kick in. Those are now on August 1st, and he sent what are known as letters of warning to 5 countries, with more on the way, as maybe as many as 20, according to Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick.
So you saw 14 letters went out yesterday. You should expect another anywhere from 15 to 20 letters to go out over the next 2 days, really setting down tariff lines for the key driving countries. And then we'll set out a general letter to the balance, sort of setting out where they're going to be. The president is setting these tariff lines. The president is driving this agenda. This is his agenda. He knows how he wants to play it, and that's what's happening. So we'll be setting those tariff rates, and then they go into effect on August 1st.
So those letters went to an almost incoherent group of countries, including South Korea, which Trump is demanding a 25% tariff to balance trade with South Korea, except for the deal that we have with them already doesn't have tariffs on U.S. goods. So it actually makes it wildly unfair for South Korea, who's a major supplier of electronics and appliances. But those letters of warning also aren't deals. They're basically the president saying, if you don't meet our terms, we're not going to play with you anymore, which is all fine and well when you're negotiating tactics for a business, but the U.S. isn't a company, and other countries know that. It's how the name taco tariffs came about. You might have heard that, which stands for Trump always chickens out, which is admittedly a dumb name for these things, but it does get to the major idea here that if Trump talks tough at the beginning of these negotiations but caves in the end, there's kind of no incentive for a country to agree to U.S. demands, because they also know that the longer the tariffs are in place, the worse things are going to get for American consumers. Now, Trump and the people around him talk about him as the deal maker in chief. He's the art of the deal guy. But by most standards, this is pretty bad negotiating, especially when it has the potential to tank the global economy, not just ours. And that's an idea I want you to hang on to for a little later. Now, because he extended those tariff deadlines to August 1st, the stock market rallied today, which Trump talked about on social media, saying, in part, tech stocks, industrial stocks, and NASDAQ hit all-time record highs, and the U.S. is taking in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. Country is now back, which he put in quotation marks, which I know that I've said this before, but when he does that, it makes it look like he's not serious about the thing he's saying. That quotes make it look like a joke. And I also know that this is the way that he talks, and the grammar guy in me should just get over this thing. But also, these are official communications from the President of the United States, and I think maybe correct punctuation is the least we can do here, but whatever. Let's take a look at what he actually said, one thing at a time. First, it is true that tech stocks and the stock market overall did hit or come close to some new highs, though largely that's in response to Trump saying that he was extending this tariff pause, meaning The market wasn't going to change a whole lot until August 1st, and so that alleviated some worries. It's also what's known as a dead cat bounce, which is a terrible name for an economic phenomenon that's a false rally before another downturn. And it's something we've seen time and time again since Trump announced these tariffs way back in March. Trump announces tariffs, the markets sink, he backs off, they rise, he talks about the deals being made, and they sink again. In this case, what we're waiting on for the other half of that little loop is Trump announced a 50% tariff or tax on imported copper and a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals, two things in which at least some or all of the mining, production, and manufacturing of those things can't be done at the scale that we need in the U.S., meaning we have to get those things from somewhere else. That's how global trade works. Now, the second part of what Trump said is that the U.S. is taking in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff money. That simply is not true. According to his own Treasury Department, as of July 8th, the U.S. had taken in $99 billion in tariff revenue. Now, that is more than double where we were at last year, around $47 billion. But remember, while that money does go into government funds and can be used to, say, pay down some of the national debt, that money isn't coming from the other countries. It's coming from us, as businesses pay higher prices to stock their shelves or get materials to make the things they make, and then we, the people who buy those things, have to pay higher prices in the end. And while the Trump administration is right to say that we haven't seen those higher costs just yet or a significant rise in inflation like many economists have been predicting, experts say those things take time. A global study from 2020 in the Journal of Policy Modeling, which you know is just a real page-turner, found that across 151 countries from 1963 to 2014, high tariffs created a persistent decline in output from a given country's economy, meaning those economies got worse. Another study from the Federal Reserve from last year looked at Trump's tariffs in 2018 and 2019 and found that employment shrank in industries, especially manufacturing, that had to pay those import tariffs because it was more expensive to do business in the U.S., which meant cutting jobs. Now, Trump and his administration have said that none of that will be the case this time around. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said inflation is the dog that didn't bark, meaning it was a warning, but it never happened. But all indications are that it will. And economists say that things like inflation and big job losses lag behind the initial shock from tariffs because the economy is big and slow. So it's not a matter of if, but when we'll feel the effects. And then there's the last piece, the one I asked you to hang on to from earlier. It has to do with us blowing through this deadline. It's the chaos, it's the uncertainty of how Trump has approached and is approaching these trade talks. It's actually making it harder for countries to partner with us and to make these deals, and it's driving our allies away from us. This is something that I've talked about a little bit before, but it's worth bringing up again, and I think continuing to do that as Trump goes back and forth on these deals. When Trump announced steep tariffs were on their way back in the spring, Japan and South Korea announced they were going to get closer to China, which looked like it might be a more stable economy to deal with than the U.S. Japan and South Korea are our two largest military partners in Asia, and them getting cozier to China caused some real alarm among national security experts. The European Union is currently arguing amongst itself because some countries like Germany, a heavy manufacturing company that relies on things like U.S. oil, want a deal quickly, but others, like France and Italy, aren't as sure because they export a lot of luxury goods and food to the U.S., and they don't want those prices to go up because it means they'll sell less. And those are just a couple of the examples, but it's all happening all over the place. And it's having this effect of forcing the U.S. out of the conversation of global trade, not driving it, even if countries continue to talk to Trump about the new trade deals. As one economist from the Council on Foreign Relations put it, the constantly changing tariffs and shifting deadlines may get countries to the table, but very few will tackle comprehensive trade issues if the Trump administration cannot guarantee that the trade chaos will come to an end, which means that uncertainty, no matter how much money is being brought in by the tariffs, no matter how much it's a part of the playbook the White House is trying to use to make these trade deals, isn't good for anyone as things stand right now. And as we look to August 1st, we can expect to see this cycle repeat itself. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any new episodes there. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. We get a bunch of bonus content. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod. All one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.